Okay, thank you.
You got it. People may have to accept that. So again, we're starting ELAC. Thank you all very much for joining us. The last agenda item that we're going to go through is just future agenda items. Anything that you all would like to talk about specifically, things maybe we can cover, things maybe we've forgotten or would like to look at anew. So that's where we're headed. Of course, public Q&A. I think we have generally members of the ELAC here, maybe some additional members of the public. We always just kind of let there be a robust discussion. So you all know that we're going to call on you, raise your hand, just feel free to ask any questions throughout the night as you have comments. Next slide, Jasper. So you all know this, we all live on it, right? We can raise our hand if you'd like. You can use the chat functionality, which is at the bottom of the screen. If there's something you'd maybe like to follow up on, if there's some additional information you need, just put it in the chat, or if you want to share something, we can certainly use that on the chat button. Everything, this is shared amongst all of us. There are no presenters or panelists. It's just everybody on here. So you can chat away and everybody can see that. So I think, as I said, just so nice to see everybody. Honestly, this has been a project that I have missed greatly over the last 16 months. I have spoken to some of you over the phone, not all of you, but it's great to do that. So I thought we'd just kind of restart with some introductions. And if it's okay, if I can ask the ELAC members to go ahead and introduce yourselves. As you know, this was a slide that we put together so long ago, but it also kind of mentioned some of the areas, the member organizations, as we called them. So if you don't mind, and I just say this because we have some new team members, if you don't maybe mind introducing yourself, kind of your role in the project, and perhaps the organization or the community, the neighborhood that you represent. So if that's okay, I'm just going to kind of call on you. I did just get a chat question. Will we be able to share this video? Absolutely. We'll share this recording with all of you. You can use it and look at it on your free time. We're happy to do that. We traditionally put it on a YouTube, just link. So that's how we can do it and send it out to everybody. So Bob will be happy to do that. So Bob, since you asked the first question, do you mind, my friend, starting off maybe with an introduction and kind of your role on the ELAC?
Oh, thank you, Marcus. My name is Bob Megan, and I am Vice Chair of Lafayette's Senior Advisory Board. I've been on the Senior Advisory Board for 10 years, and over the years, the Senior Advisory Board has been extremely interested in housing, especially as it affects seniors, and now seniors on fixed income. And what really excites us about the Willoughby Corner project is its affordability for everyone, but especially for seniors. And I'm very happy to be a part of this process representing Lafayette Senior Advisory Board.
Thanks, Bob. Whoever would like to jump in, go right ahead.
I'll go. I'm Julie Pillar, and I am representing Sister Carmen Community Center. We're a family resource center located in Lafayette. And one of the things we are passionate about is keeping people housed and finding people that are unhoused affordable housing. And we're excited this project is coming to Lafayette and will give more locals a chance to stay in the community instead of having to move to the east or to another community, because things are really at a crisis level, I think, in terms of prices.
Terrific. Thank you.
I will
Karen,
go.
please.
I'm Kirsten King, and I initially was on to represent the Social Justice Committee from Immaculate Conception Catholic Church, and now I'm actually in the Human Rights Commission for the city of Lafayette.
Congratulations. That's terrific. Thank you. Karen, do you mind?
Karen Norbeck. I'm a representative of Old Town, and you're probably thrilled to hear I don't have a raise your hand icon on my deal here for some reason. That's happened to me before, so I'm not quite sure.
No problem.
Why,
and Karen, I promise you that was not intentional. We didn't do that. That's right. You talk whenever you'd like to talk. Vicki, do you mind?
I'm unmuting me. So, yeah, Vicki Euland. I'm the I'm an Old Town representative along with Karen. I too do not have a raise your hand icon. I feel like you're discriminating against Old Town, Marcus.
It might be Old Town. I think we've already figured out a trend. Why did I call on you together? Yes, that's right. Christy.
Christy Walsh, representing the Flag neighborhood. I also do not have a raise your hand.
So maybe we don't have that functionality. Yeah.
Maybe it's just discriminating against ELAC neighborhoods. Yeah, I'll save my complaining for later.
That's right. And Christy, if you don't mind, because I think you're very unique in this, you live immediately east of the site. Is that fair for all of our new team members?
Yes, I live across the street.
There you go.
There's
Thank you.
Two lanes separating me from all that construction.
Great, thank you. And I'll just mention again, because of Flag Drive, Wendy could not be here this evening. Tonight's her birthday, so she had a party planned. So Wendy is still going to be joining us, just not this evening. Let's see, Cappy, go right ahead.
You get unmuted. I'm Cappy Hall. I am an at-large representative on this committee, and I live on Emma Street. So it's been exciting for me, actually, to think that this is going to go on, even though there will be changes in traffic and density. But I think it's incredibly important that we have this project, and I've been frustrated with the delay. So glad to be here tonight.
It's terrific. Thank you. Bonnie?
Hi, I guess I wrote I was Old Town, but I'm Emma Street representative. It's been so long I forgot. So
That's right.
I live on East Emma, and yeah, I'm glad that you were able to come up with a way that we could meet about this.
Thank you very much. Who else? Do we have other members? That might be all of the ELAC members that we have. I know Anne Marie couldn't be here this evening, so I'll send it out. I did expect to hear from Sam Todd. So Sam, you're not on there, are you? I'll make sure that next time Peak to Peak is here. I apologize for that as well. So maybe I think on our agenda there, Jasper, if we go to the next slide, maybe if Nori, if you don't mind, maybe you'd like to do some introductions for BCHA or whoever you'd like to do that on your behalf, and then we can kind of have a broader conversation. So these are some of the team members, but Nori or Justin, whoever would like to introduce the BCHA team.
Great. Well, I'm Nari Boyd. I'm the interim director for the Boulder County Housing Authority. And I will answer a bit for why the delays. And it is really, really great to see everybody. And Marcus, I do appreciate you getting everybody together virtually. And we are excited to finally be able to pivot back from focusing on COVID. That did take a lot of our resources and effort to, it was hard to turn away from Willoughby Corner, but we also had to meet the need in the community for rent assistance. Keeping folks housed became our #1 priority for the whole past year and a half. And moving forward with rent assistance and really focus on keeping folks housed and having housing stability as opposed to creating new housing. And that was a really hard choice to make, but with limited resources and staff, it was absolutely the right thing to do. And I do appreciate your patience with our process. During that time, we spent funneled about $10 million in local, state, and federal rent assistance, keeping people housed, voucher assistance, creating housing helpline. And we have a couple of slides with some of that information where folks can still reach out and get help with their rent assistance. Eviction prevention, enforcing and supporting the moratorium on evictions. So that was what we focused on, and I am so glad to now be back working on Willoughby Corner with a fabulous team. So Justin Lightfield is, I believe some of you might have met him previously, but he's our lead on housing development. So he's the housing development manager for Boulder County Housing Authority. And we've also hired 2 new staff. Molly will be leading this project and has a fantastic background in architectural design, moving a lot of sophisticated projects through various zoning processes and is super sensitive to community issues and just has a great eye for design. And also Lauren, who has had a different role within Boulder County and the county attorney's office and brings that great legal background that is also necessary as we're moving projects through the entitlements and zoning phase, as well as negotiating with lenders and investors. And so Justin and Molly will be leading this particular development. We also have this fantastic team of Pochner, Norris Design, and we've added HB&A architects. HB&A is very familiar with Lafayette and did a fantastic job, over a decade ago on Josephine Commons and Aspen Wall and the design of that development, which is of course deeply affordable senior housing. It also includes rental housing for families and included development of 7 single family lots that were also part of a for sale component. So we're very excited to bring HBA back to the table to help us with this next phase of the design. Lastly, I'll let you know that the development team has been moving forward with work behind the scenes, even though many of the community members might not have seen it. They've spent about $500,000 on pre-development costs, architecture, engineering studies, surveys, traffic. We are also in the process of executing about another 450 to close to 500,000 in additional contracts to move this project forward. They've also applied for Boulder County Worthy Cause funds for affordable housing. Just a lot of work behind the scenes that might not show up this evening, but I want you to know that we're all fully committed to this, and you'll see this project moving forward quite a bit from here on out. So that was my very excited but lengthy introduction, and I'll be quiet now. Thanks, Marcus.
Oh, that's terrific. No worries. Thank you. And Dawn, I know, Dawn, you'll still be leading the team with Kristen. Is that right, for Norris Design?
That's right. We actually have a larger team of 6 or 7 people, and we will continue to help with the planning and landscape architecture. For the planning, there's still work to be done on the entitlements for the preliminary plan process, as well as rezoning the property and a comprehensive plan amendment in Lafayette. So we'll be helping the team get those entitlements in place. And then, of course, the landscape architecture, our landscape architecture team will continue to be involved through construction documents. And so I'm here today, and also Kristen Dean is a planner on our team.
Great. And I do want the ELAC members to know, thanks, Don. I think I mentioned earlier, I added Jasper Vu to our staff. I think he joined us the week that we were at Planning Commission. That's actually been some time ago now, as we all know, on the sketch plan. But I think a few of you met him that evening. So we're really excited to be back. I do want to just kind of say this is a much larger team, as you see here now. I think one thing we wanted to do is to be sure that you knew the full component of the team. Of course, we still have our structural engineers and our traffic engineers, and all of those team members have not changed. They're working through a lot of the challenges that we've spoken with you all about before. So a broader team that is something that is reflected in what we heard from the city, that we needed to bring on some additional specialties, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So Jasper, do you mind going to the next slide? And then folks, honestly, we'll kind of jump in here. We're going to just address kind of the delay. Nori did a great job there, but I think we have a couple of slides here that we just want to kind of show a little bit, just so you know a little bit about what BCHA was working on, and then we'll return to this project. So Nori or Molly, whoever wants to kind of go through this, but I know you've got a little information here to share of kind of what the last year and a half has looked like.
Sure, thanks. I'll just wrap this up quickly. And really, if anybody does know anybody who needs rent assistance, this housing helpline, that 303-441 number, is the number to call. And also there's that email address. So this is just a synopsis, but I also like to be able to pitch this whenever I'm in the community, because many folks who don't typically find themselves needing rent assistance. I just want to reinforce that it doesn't matter where you live or what your needs are within the county. feel free to call that housing helpline, and it can help with rent assistance and a lot of other assistance as well, not just with your rent. So these are just some snapshot slides, and we don't need to spend a lot of time on that, but I just want it out publicly. Thanks. And we can skip past that one too, Marcus. Thank you.
You got it. And again, folks, you'll have that. If you do have anybody to share that with, you'll have the slides. We'll send them to you, and you can disperse them as you'd like to. So folks, I don't want to overlook. I know that I just want to acknowledge, I know there has been some frustration, some real frustration and deserved frustration about kind of the time that went away. I know we have all lived some interesting times in the last year and a half. I think it was probably last March when we had our last formal meeting. So I'm going to just say 18 months. That's really what it's been. Listen, I think we could have all probably communicated more thoroughly and gone back and forth. I think all of us continue to live. I just want to say that I think what happened in a lot of ways is the missions of this project, as Nori described, there were really tough decisions that had to be made. And I think, frankly, we all continue to keep making those, right? There was a number of things that changed at the city. They lost their planning director. There were some delays there. There were some kind of delays all over the place. So I just want to know, I want to share that I know there has been some frustration. I've certainly spoken to some of you. I apologize for that. I know that is real and genuine. So I just want to say it. If anybody wants to add to that, feel free. I don't want to cut off that conversation at all or have any comments, but I certainly want you to know how committed we are to moving this project forward and on a very timely basis. So if anybody has any comments or questions, feel free to go right ahead. And I'm excited that you guys are teaching me great things in the chat already. So I have found new functionality just by reading the chat. So thank you. Yes. So folks, I guess we're going to move through that. Again, I just want to offer that and feel free. I do want to talk now about HB&A, the architectural team that has been added. I think again, and maybe it's Molly or whoever would like to introduce them. One thing when we left you all in March, just to set the table again, we were talking about making a submittal to the city for a preliminary plan. You all remember that. We went through that process. We shared what our submittal looked like. We did make that submittal to the city. We can talk about that. Jana is here as well. We made that city. We went through those first couple of steps. And really a lot of the comments that we ultimately received back from the city focused on, for us to take the next step, we needed to have an architectural team as part of our team. We needed to move into that phase of design. And so Boulder County has spent a good portion of the last probably 6 to 9 months going through that hiring process, the RFP process. So Molly or Justin, if you all want to introduce HBA and kind of maybe that process you went through, go right ahead, and then we'll hear from them.
Sure, yeah, I'll kick that off. Thanks, Marcus. And I'm Justin Lightfield with the Boulder County Housing Authority. Really excited to be here on this call today and move this project forward here. So HB&A, they were awarded the architecture and engineering RFP contract for Willoughby Corner, and that includes vertical design, and within that you have floor plans, elevations, exterior and interior design of the building. So that, as of right now, is what encompasses their contract. As Marcus noted, this was a very intensive review. We actually received responses from 12 very well qualified firms here based out of Colorado. And throughout that process included review, interview with finalist firms, and a BCHA panel that included not only the development staff, but also maintenance and operations and property management staff as well, who reviewed these 12 firms and selected HB&A out of that. Just want to point out a couple of things and highlights to HB&A. They have a lot of extensive experience in providing architectural services for low-income and workforce housing tax credit finance projects. As Nori mentioned earlier, HB&A was also the design and lead architect for BCHA's communities in Lafayette, including Aspenwall with 154 homes and Josephine Commons with 74. So they're very familiar with building codes, the municipal code here in the city of Lafayette, although it's changed over the years a little bit, but they have that familiarity as well as that relationship with the city of Lafayette. And they also have a very strong track record. They've been in business for 50 years now. Actually, of this year, they are Colorado and women-owned small business here out of the state. So With that, I'm really excited to introduce the 3 team members that I see on today's call. Stephen Powell, he is the principal architect with HB&A. Tino Leon, he's the design manager, and he'll be overseeing the entire design process of the 3 phases at Willoughby Corner. And Liz Apke, she's the lead architect for HB&A, so she'll be involved in all phases as well. HB&A, as you can imagine, also is a much larger team than just the 3 members that are here. So they are staffing up for this project and will ensure that we meet project schedule that we're hoping to define here over the next few weeks with the city of Lafayette. Norris Design was already mentioned. They are on the call, and they'll continue with master planning and landscape design services for this project, including Don Ryan and Kristen Dean. And then there are 2 new sub-consultants that have come on board. They're not on the call today, but just wanted to note them. They are the Farnsworth Group. They are, and under that group is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing services. So they look at things such as HVAC systems, solar arrays, ground source heat pump systems, things such as that. So they'll be working under HB&A. And then the last group I wanted to mention is Group 14 Engineering. And they will provide energy analysis for this project as well as sustainability analysis to make sure we meet certain green standards for this project. So with that, I think I'll kick it over to either Marcus or you, Steve, to talk a little bit more about HB&A.
Go right ahead, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Appreciate it. Hello, ELAC team. It's good to see you all tonight and meet you. We've heard lots of good things about you, so we're glad to be joining the team here and being with you tonight. I guess I'll talk a little bit more about our role with Boulder County, maybe some more of our experience and kind of where we are at to date with the process. So first of all, I just want to say that Boulder County is giving us an amazing start as a housing authority because they have a really clear vision for us. They are the marching orders they've given us are affordable, sustainable, and durable housing. And that's something we really take to heart. And believe it or not, we don't get that clear a vision from all our housing authority clients. So that's really important. And I think it's really going to lead to helping us focus our priorities on what we need to. So I think Nori mentioned earlier that it was almost a decade ago we worked together. I think I had in my notes, it's been a short pause. So that's how I look at it. And we've gained experience over that time. And so we're excited to bring that experience to this project as well too, and continue moving forward. So a little bit more about us. Tino and I worked together with Nori and her team. Yeah, it was over a decade ago. We started on Josephine Commons and Aspinwall. And so that was about a 7-year process of building that site out, close to 15 acres. So there's obviously time and investment of time in these processes. And so we're committed to that. We're here for the long term. And we want you to know we're planning on being here through all the phases of Willoughby Corner as well too. As Justin mentioned earlier, we're celebrating in our 50th year this year. So that's really exciting for us. And just to let all of you know, the 3 of us on the call tonight, Tino, Liz, and myself, we've got about 50 years together with HB&A. So that's kind of cool. But just wanted to share that with everybody too. So you've got an experienced team here. We have another architect who will be joining the team as we get further into the design. And then we also have other team members who will be helping to support the 4 architects who are going to be working on this project as we're moving forward. So just so you know, we've got a lot of folks, and Boulder County is planning on keeping us busy, so that's great. And so we'll have the staff available to make sure that happens. Beyond partnering with Boulder County, we've got experience with permanent supportive housing. We've done that in the recent past. One of the first, they call them PSHs in the state. So that's where folks are transitioning from homelessness and trying to find a path forward and experiencing living in an apartment and moving on from that. So that's been great for our team to work together on. Farnsworth Group is our engineers, and we've worked with them on multiple housing projects where we analyze how we're going to heat and cool the spaces and how to do that in an efficient way and a way that is sustainable over the long term and helps minimize utility costs. So that's another important part of the process that we want to have success in with you. We've worked in master planned housing communities over decades, from inception to closing out communities as well too. So that's been helpful in our experience. And we've got a team with great visualization skills. So we plan on showing you many different types of renderings and models that will help you visualize what the design is going to look like, so we can kind of all be on the same page together. So currently we're in construction on a 224 unit master planned community that has multiple phases. And we're wrapping up some construction documents for another 150 unit community as well too. So this work is coming at a great time as our design work is wrapping up on these other communities that we're dealing with. So as we're kind of getting into the process here with Boulder County and the rest of their team, we have already been on board for about 2 months now. We've started working through programming spaces in the community buildings that'll be on this site. We've started looking at the senior buildings and what functions and spaces need to go into those facilities. And we've started some conceptual design on the floor plans and what those can look like as well too. So just to let you know, we've got a little bit of inertia already going. We haven't just joined this week, so that's good. And I think we'll talk about the schedule a little bit later, but we're underway, so that's good. And we really appreciate the Norris Design and Drexel Burrell, as well as Boulder County, kind of bringing us up to speed with the rest of the design team. That's been really important for us. I guess just to wrap up, we really love the vision that's been cast for your community and this site in particular. And we really appreciate the listen, integrate, and draw diagram that was part of the RFP process when they were looking for an architect. And that's how we like to design. We really like to listen and incorporate the needs that Boulder County and the city of Lafayette will have into the design process. So we're here to support and lead the vertical design in the same way that the horizontal design has been planned over the last several years. And so we're excited to be integrated into this team and help it move forward where it needs to. So thanks so much for having us tonight. And I'll turn it back over to Marcus.
That's great. Thanks very much, Steve. And I do want to just say, and then maybe if there are any questions for Steve or his team, that would be terrific, or comments. One thing that I wanted to share with all of you is that there was such a record of our discussions and information. So one thing that Steve and his team spent so much time on was actually on our website, right? The materials that we had put together, the information that came from you all as steering committee members or ELAC members. So they really had a great start. And I just want you to understand that just kind of in our process, the reason they were able, frankly, to jump in the last couple of months is because of a lot of that guidance we had from you all about the Emma Street corridor, the Flag Street, the kind of how the separation is, the vision of that community. So just know that's kind of how they jumped into that. We've spent a lot of time actually talking about some of those documents. We're going to come to the website here in a little bit because we are actually spending a lot of time doing monthly updates now on the website. We're going to have that where it's much more of a resource for you all as well and the community as a whole, so they can go there. So just remind me, but if there are any comments, you all certainly know the vision of this site, the kind of ground, the horizontal plan, as Stephen called it. Like, are there any comments that you'd like to share, kind of design specific or thoughts with Stephen and his team? They'll obviously come back with a lot of this conceptual work that they're working on and share that in subsequent meetings. But if you have any comments or questions, go right ahead and fire them off.
Marcus, I was just curious.
Sure.
We'll probably get into this, but we did discuss having an old town look with the buildings having some character. That's sort of what the preliminary elevation has shown. And I just want to make sure that that is still the focus, since they're showing us this flat roofed architecture. So,
Right.
which I'm very much hoping that is not the direction we are going.
Great. And I think that's right. And I'll just restate that. I mean, Stephen, I think Christy, we spent a lot of time talking about the overall character, right? And I think it's an amalgamation of around there, a very rural area, Old Town. And I think we always kind of wanted to draw on kind of that palette, if you will, of Old Town. So maybe your thoughts on kind of your initial impressions on that.
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. You know, Josephine Commons and Aspinwall is a different location, a different place in the city. So we want to incorporate what's best for the site that we're given. And so when we look at concepts, we're going to look at multiple options for the elevations. So yes, we are doing image mining from the community around the site. And so our team is capturing that. We're going to use that for reference. We may be looking at how buildings are massed, and for example, if there's a lot of, you know, if there's porches we want to look at incorporating into the design of the townhomes and duplexes or other buildings that we see in Old Town, that may be something we want to incorporate into the design. We may be looking at colors and textures. So there's lots of different things to look at in the surrounding community. So those are all things we're capturing, we're documenting, and that you'll see incorporated into some of our future design ideas. So yes, those are all things we will be looking at.
I have a comment for Jana. I mean, don't we have Old Town design guidelines or historic design guidelines that maybe they could consult? Jana?
Hi, Nikki. Yeah, that's a great question. We do, and if we haven't shared those with you recently, then we will be happy to do that. I think that would be a really good starting place. There's also some good, I would call it, historical references in that document, roof lines and other things that I think would be helpful to your team. So I'll make a note to make sure that you have that.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Vicki. It's a good suggestion.
So much.
Anybody else? Any initial thoughts or questions? I know we all react to images, as we should, right? So we know that's, we'll talk about that next meeting and hopefully some of that material that we'll be able to share then. Stephen and his team are just jumping into this. So I think they're just starting that kind of conceptualizing and looking at that. So we'll come back to that in a little bit, but obviously we'll come back to the ELAC to share those images and to the ELAC and then to the larger community during kind of that submittal process. So maybe if we go to the next slide here, and again, anybody just interrupt me, ask me any question that you'd like. But I thought, and some of this material you're going to see on the next few slides, you have seen a lot of times, but it's been a long time. It's been 18 months. And I just wanted to kind of go to where we left off, if you will, just a reminder of a few of the maybe most outstanding issues or issues that really were left to be resolved. And as you all know, we kind of left at that sketch plan. So we left you in March and it had this Willoughby Corner preliminary plan review. You all know this image looking west kind of from a drone photo above Christie's house, far extended above Christie's house, looking down on this site. You can see peak to peak, and obviously the left side is the south, or the, excuse me, the, where am I looking? Yes, south side of the image there, kind of understanding that. And then Emma Street kind of going into Old Town. We tried to site the roundabout at about the right height now. As you all know, the property to the north that's being planned, or the agreement that the city made with that landowner to really expand that, really helped us there. And just understanding kind of that image. So the next slide, and I'll go through these quickly. I just want to reference what this was. This presentation is actually from these slides, excuse me, are from what we presented to Planning Commission as a team. And the reason I think we just wanted to highlight this is our team has looked at this, studied it in actually quite a bit of detail. But this was that part of the presentation where we were really focused on, here's what we heard, right? Let's listen. What did we hear from all of you leading the outreach, and then more of your community members? So of course, as was just shared, shared, right? The look and feel of Old Town. Look at that density, that lower intensity should occur along Emma Street, and then also the peak-to-peak traffic concerns. How in the heck does this work with the roundabouts? And we all know those two really intense traffic time periods. So the next slide is how we did this on all of it. Then we integrated and draw. Stephen mentioned the listen, integrate, and draw. You know, how we tried to do that was duplicate that Old Town residential character, put those duplexes along Emma, right? Along Emma and also along 120th to really wrap the site, as if you will, as it transitioned to other residential. And then the transportation solutions, this is such a minor description of them, but the Canterbury connection, right? With that roundabout, how we all work through that with peak to peak, understanding that some of our traffic to go southbound on 120th would come through our site from the school. And then of course the new light there at 120th and Emma Street. So that's kind of Old Town and Emma. I know that's way too simplified, but just reminding everybody of kind of where we left off, the challenges that still needed to be addressed. The next slide talked a little bit more specifically about Flag Drive. Again, kind of here's what we heard. Duplicate that. I think Jasper, you actually skipped one there. Is there the first one maybe that had, maybe not, that's okay. We probably did have some listen, some idea, but here's what we kind of integrated and drew on this site. We wanted to duplicate again that Old Town character to show that density transition, that real buffer from Flag Street. We think that buffer is so important, not just from a drainage, but actually from a separation of the street and the more rural character. And then again, you know, those transportation improvements that we want to make there on the east side of the site. Next slide, please. The southern edge, right? We never really found up with a better name for this area, but as it kind of transitions to a little bit more industrial, I know there is so much happening in Lafayette, even on 120th, some of the improvements that are being made on that street on south of this image. But what we heard, right, was make that trail connection to the Burlington Trail, that industrial edge. Maybe density, if there is going to be more density, it makes sense there against that kind of urban edge there, or that industrial edge. And then also transportation was important from a pedestrian connection point as well, right? And I'll just say again, another very important was also that pedestrian connection across the Flag Drive neighbors, wherever that happened, up at 120th or Flag Drive, but there needed to be some pedestrian connections there to the east of the site. Next slide. That integrate and draw, what we heard and what we've tried to get to, but frankly, sorry, Stephen, this is your teams. You have to solve all these issues now, right? With the rest of us. But this is kind of where we were headed, right? That trail connection to Burlington, how important that was to pull that trail in. As we all know, it goes north through Old Town, et cetera. And really that Inspire trail connection onto the school, kind of the west of us, south and west of us, how important that trail connection is there. The scale, I think we looked at a lot, the senior and the multifamily buildings there, a little bit interchangeable, those three buildings that we show on the south, but we always thought that was probably, if there's going to be density, right, 3-story product there, that's where it was going to be. It was going to lie against that southern edge and really understand how that worked. I think neighbors still want to understand what's the separation from 120th and how does it make kind of a buffer transition to the school. Transportation, I already mentioned it. All those pedestrian connections are so important. I bet you all remember there on 120th, we ended up putting a 10-foot multi-use trail on the western side of that street, on our side of the street, because we think that's a really important trail connection. Obviously, as I said, those improvements that are being made on 120th, we want to really integrate that planning with what the city is planning as well. Next slide. I think we just have a couple more of these. Last one, I know Peak to Peak is not here this evening, and I certainly will catch up with them before our next meeting, but this is that the challenge of every piece is different on this site, right? So a flourishing campus, all the things that are happening, very intense traffic periods and amazing usage, right? From their kids and expanding. And of course, that area there that doesn't show it, but they have future plans for the development of that area there. We need to understand those future plans, right, for Peak to Peak, and how that connects to Canterbury, that new street and the roundabout. That transportation, of course, that traffic peaks and flows. How do we move some of that traffic through our site to go to 120th? How do we not send it through up to Old Town, excuse me, as much as we can limit that, and really how to move that or segment a little better on Emma Street. So that's what we are told. Hopefully, next slide shows a little bit of how we tried to integrate that. And now we got to take all of the final steps, right? So that focus kind of collaborative planning. We met with Peak to Peak 3 or 4 times to really understand what that eastern edge of the campus felt like to them, our western edge, so they could really understand how Peak to Peak felt on the Canterbury, what our residential presence was there, and also the pedestrian experience. We matched that intensity, right? The townhomes to multifamily, so they really had a more gradual feel moving away from the campus, if you will. The gardens, as you see that labeled, that became a really important buffer or setback. I know you all remember that, but that was something that became very important to Peak, not only because of the connection to the Burlington Trail, but just to buffer that, to provide some softness, if you will, and transition into our site with the park that then goes interior. That's really a generous kind of transition there from that campus feel into a more kind of neighborhood feel of the proposed Willoughby Corner. So I think the other thing was that we have always talked about kind of unlocking that traffic situation where we were able to send the southbound traffic on 120th through our site instead of sending everybody up to Emma Street and really gumming up that intersection at 120th. So this was the last one, I think. Jasper, is that fair? Let's see. Next slide. Okay, so here's the last things that we ended with. And I bet a lot of you remember, most of you were at that planning commission in September of 2019. So that is almost 2 years ago, which is remarkable. As we said here in September of 2021, 2 years ago, we were at planning commission on the sketch plan. And we acknowledge this continued community response. Frankly, because of a lot of you, a lot of great feedback, we knew there were some things that were still outstanding and not yet fully developed. The Emma Street roundabout, right? Where was that on a siting, a north or south siting? Were we taking too much Peak to Peak property? You can see how that kind of dips into their land there. So we've worked on that. We've actually changed a lot of that, how that lays out. The 120th Street section, that's a mouthful, kind of understanding what does that look like? And frankly, what does the city and the county want that to look like? City on one side, county on the other. How do we plan that 120th Street pedestrian exchange, and who should plan it and when should that happen? And then again, that 120th Street multifamily building, that actually kind of came up at the Planning Commission, that most southeastern building of ours. How close should that be to Flag Drive? What's the separation there? So those were 3 very specific things that we needed to continue to work on in the community response. Next slide, Jasper. I'm not going to read this at all. This is way too much information, but the reason we put this in here is so we could share this again. I guess we're mentioning, right, that was 2 years ago that we were at the Planning Commission. Jana was there with us. So thank you, Jana. That was a very long evening, but you can see it was voted 6 in favor. It was unanimous. There was 1 absent. But these conditions of approval, so besides all of those things that I've mentioned from the community that we acknowledged needed to be taken to the finish line, these were the 9 conditions of approval that the Planning Commission put on them. You all know what that means. That means we have to, as we move through the process, we need to meet these requirements as we go through that. So I'm just sharing those so you can look at these later if you're interested. But just to remind everybody, these are the other 9 factors, if you will, that are really guiding Norris Design and HB&A as they kind of move forward in this process. Next slide. So that was a whole lot of review. I don't think there's anything surprising there, but if there's something else that somebody would really like to emphasize, fire away if you think we've missed something kind of in those important matters that we're still continuing forward. We're doing okay? All right, good. So I'll come back here, the Lafayette preliminary plan process. I'm going to turn this over. I saw Jana just turned her image on, and I know, so Jana is here to help us through this. I think Molly, if you and Jana maybe kind of talk a little bit about this. We have embarked on the preliminary process, but that has been some time ago. So we know the city is going about making some modifications, if you will, to that process, or a little bit kind of where we're at in that. So Molly or Jana, if you want to just talk, we've got a couple of slides that kind of lay that out, and I'm happy to go back and forth. But Molly, maybe you want to jump in first.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, everyone. And I just want to, as I'm introduced to this project, I was kind of hired on around the same time as HB&A. So It is a real pleasure to arrive at a project midway and have so much community involvement. I think to Steve's point, there is a clear direction, and you can kind of sense from, I was digging through all the history and all the work you guys did as an advisory committee. And you guys really distilled some good vision for this project. So it's a real pleasure to come to the table and have all this work. And the city's been a real pleasure to work with as well. I will, Jan, if you don't mind, I'll turn it over to you to kind of explain how we're benefiting this project with a little tweak to the planning process.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I'm going to start with saying thank you for having me. The sketch and preliminary plan processes are complicated. A preliminary plan, I'm going to start with kind of the purpose of a preliminary plan. Preliminary PUD plan, which is a planned unit development, really sets the stage for a project for success. So once the site plan and architectural pieces of that come together, we know that the setbacks, all the measurable standards such as height and lot coverage and all that good stuff, we know what to expect when it comes to the site planning work and the architectural design. The PUD, or planned unit development, again, it can include design guidelines of its own. The city also has certain criteria related to site plan and architecture that the applicants have to follow. But the PUD also allows for modifications in order to create or have a more creative design to a project. So just for some history, the city's development code was introduced in the mid-'80s, and it has not changed a whole lot since then. We have some minimum lot sizes that, quite frankly, were more conducive to, the 80s, 90s type development where you had bigger homes on bigger lots. And as we move into some, more compact development, especially as the land becomes more scarce and expensive, and we're looking especially, on these projects that are permanently affordable, they have to pencil out. And so sometimes there will be a request in the PUD for smaller setbacks or greater lot coverage, things like that. And so the PUD really sets the stage for what is to come, what would be expected in the site plan and architectural review when we get to that point. So it has some standards in it that may be different from what the city's code is for some of those measurable standards. And then outside of the PUD, as part of the site planning process, there are other things that can be looked at, such as a reduction in parking for certain types of projects and that sort of thing. So what we've tried to do, and I think some of you are familiar with our new director and his attempts, and I think we've done a pretty good job so far, and I think we'll continue this, to kind of separate out that PUD process from the site planning process. And the reason is because we used to kind of pack them all together. And so an applicant would come in and we would pack all the applications onto one meeting. So if one item, let's say that there was one contentious item, let's say it was height. Somebody was asking for an increase in height. They had all of their site planning and architectural done, at a pretty fair expense, pretty expensive process to do that because you have to get into engineering and other things when you get into that level of detail. And so if there's one hiccup in the PUD process, it sort of derailed the rest of the applications. And so what we're really trying to do is separate out the PUD process a little bit from, and we can do this by the code, separate out the PUD process so it really sets the project up. So if, let's say that there's some concern over setbacks for buildings, that the applicant is requesting for a modification or a reduction to the setbacks, we can then look at that, come back to the table, get the PUD refined in such a way that the site plan and architectural, if it meets those PUD and also the code criteria, that it's set up for success. And so we took the sketch plan forward, and the sketch plan is the very first step in the PUD process. The second step, and as you heard, the sketch plan, and no, the sketch plan was approved. And what that does is it basically just says you're allowed now to proceed through the rest of the PUD process and the other applications. So the second step in the PUD process is the preliminary plan and preliminary plat. And platting basically just sets out the lots. But you have to know where your lots are, because you have to know if you need, for instance, a setback reduction, you're going to have to know, we're planning this size home on this size lot. Therefore, maybe the lot coverage is more than is allowed by code, and there's a modification request for that. Or maybe there is a setback reduction request so that the homes are more compact together. And so what we have talked with the Willoughby team about doing is actually what we're doing on other projects too, and that is separating out the PUD process and setting that aside at the preliminary stage from the other applications, which are going to include, we anticipate a comprehensive plan amendment, rezoning, and then the site plan and architectural applications. And so, because really a PUD it's a series, it's a process, a series, so sketch, preliminary, and final. Planning Commission sees and reviews the sketch plan, and then they are the deciding body. They approve with conditions or deny the preliminary plan. And then it moves on to the final plan, and with the final plan go the other applications. So the comprehensive plan amendment, the rezoning, and the site plan and architectural. And so what we've talked about doing as the architect team is working on the site plan and architecture, even though we have some idea of what those code modifications are going to be in a general sense from the form, number of units, the lot sizes, and that sort of thing. We can continue through that PUD process and set up that application first, as we did with the sketch plan application, rather than jumbling up the preliminary plan, the preliminary plat, plus all the other applications at once. It's going to be cleaner, it's going to be easier for people to understand, and also, again, it doesn't derail the entire project and cause all of the added expense on the front end if for some reason, let's say a setback is not approved. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are in the preliminary. Well, first of all, let me stop and ask if anybody has any questions on the applications or the purpose of the planned unit development.
I don't see anybody. Anybody with any questions or comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anybody either. I'll continue on, but I'll pause again for any questions as I move forward. So this matrix, I'll say, that is up on the screen, it's a little bit outdated, I believe. The preliminary or the PUD process was actually amended gosh, in 2018, I believe it was. It was right when I started with the city. And so there are very similar processes. In fact, they're the exact same process for both sketch plans and preliminary plans. And then the final plan, once you get to that step, you should pretty well know, what your building layout is going to be and all the other stuff. So what we say is sketch plans are essentially conceptual plans. They give a general idea of how a development would lay out. And then the preliminary plans, what they do is they get into more detail. They get into more specifics so that we know what the applicant is going to be requesting for the code modifications, for example, or if they want to integrate certain design guidelines. Let's say that we were talking about roof styles. maybe something that they want to add in there to ensure that there's some conformance with the Old Town design, that, you know, these, you know, the roofs will be pitched at such and such a pitch or something like that. Or maybe they want to incorporate a brick type that is, or a color that is more prevalent in the Old Town area into their design. And what it does is it sets it up so that we know that going into the site plan and architectural review. So essentially, and I'd be happy to share my screen, I can kind of, it might help. There's a lot of steps in this, so I don't want to overwhelm anybody, but at the same time, I think it might be helpful to kind of see what I look at when a project comes in for a sketch or preliminary plan. And let's see, we've been using Teams so much, I've got to figure out what the right screen is. I think I'm doing this right. All right, so do you see sketch and preliminary plans across the top in gray? And then a bunch of dates?
Not yet. I don't think so. I just see the, there, it looks like it's starting to share. There you go. Perfect.
Okay, time lapse with the
That's
internet.
great.
I suppose. Okay, so as Marcus mentioned, this is the process for both sketch and preliminary. So they're identical. And what this is this was a timeline that I laid out, and I've modified it slightly. The dates that are in the done category have pretty much already been hit. And as I move through this, we get down to some dates, and I've put in some estimated dates. What those dates actually are is going to depend on the development team. And so some of these may change, and most of these are going to be the ones in red or in bolded font. And so when we actually get in that second submittal, because we've already gone through the first submittal, and I'll go through the steps in that in just a second, what it will do is it will fill in the dates per the code requirements for what we have to hit as staff, and also what the applicant needs to hit if there are dates in there of those. So essentially, if I go back up to the top, yeah, we started this in early 2020. We probably had some discussions even earlier than this, but we held required pre-application meetings. The applicant provided what's called an illustrative plan, which is again is kind of a conceptual plan that is intended to solicit feedback. So there's a 10-day online comment period, which you can see here. It was actually held from March 11th and ended close of business on March 20th. And this is kind of, you know, it seems so far away, but these are the things that the code requires. These are the steps, I should say, that the code requires that an applicant goes through. It requires signposting and notice and all that good stuff. So we had this online comment period, and we did receive quite a few comments during that period, some maybe from some of you. And then we had a second pre-application meeting, which again is required. There are certain dates that we have to hit. And then the formal submittal actually came in the very end of March in 2020. So what we did was we started that through the review process. This was for the preliminary PUD only. None of the other applications were included, and went through that process. We hold internally, we've got a technical review committee, which is made up of various city departments. We discussed projects at that meeting to kind of ferret out any deal killer kind of issues, such as, you know, whoops, their drainage, they forgot to put the detention on the site, for example. That would be a big issue, right? The other thing that we do is we refer it out for comments from all the various city departments, fire, police, some of the boards, senior advisory committee, the public art liaison, open space, lots of different departments and agencies. Outside agencies would include, in this case, Boulder County. It would include, oh goodness, Excel, whole bunch of different outside agencies that we've got a huge referral list. So anyway, everybody comments on the preliminary PUD that's been submitted. And again, they're looking in their specialty area. So if it's engineering or public works, they're looking for engineering items. If it's Excel, they're looking for, do we have a gas line in the area? they provide comments back to us. And what we do is then we meet with our technical review committee, look through the comments, talk about them, ask questions if we need to of those referring departments and agencies. And then we also have policy review that is, it's more of an optional if it's needed. So you might get a project and let's say it's sketch plan, this came in and we said, well, is affordable the right thing in this area? That might be a policy question for the policy committee, which is made up of essentially the department heads. So it's kind of an optional meeting, but essentially once we get all the comments consolidated and try and make sure that there are no conflicting comments, the project manager, which is the planner, the project planner, we consolidate the comments into a formal response back to the applicant. And that's pretty much where we left it at this point before we went into COVID. So the next steps in this are going to be resubmittal of the application for the preliminary PUD plan and preliminary plat. And whatever date that red date ends up being, whether it's October 15th or some other date, we accept applications throughout the month, each month. Then it'll go back into a review cycle. The second review cycles per the code are a little bit shorter, and that's intentional just because the first review, of course, you're going to end up with most of the big picture comments, big issues that'll come out and that sort of thing. And then if they need to, they just keep going through that review and resubmittal process with the city, and until they get to the point where we're comfortable with it, we feel like they've met the code criteria and the plan is ready to go to the planning commission, then we basically set up all of the public notice. So for sketch and preliminary PUDs, there is a public noticing process. It includes publishing a notice in the newspaper, a public meeting, public hearing notice is mailed out to properties within at least 750 feet. In the case of this project, I think our mailing list was close to, I want to say a couple thousand people. So it's pretty large beyond the 750 feet. Then we post a sign on the property. We of course have to write up an agenda memo or a staff report for the planning commission. And then that meeting is held and the planning commission makes a decision on it. So I'm going to stop sharing and then talk a little bit about post preliminary PUD and preliminary plat. If the preliminary plat and PUD are approved by the planning commission, then it moves into the next stage of that, which is the final PUD. And with that, the other applications will come along with it. That will include the comprehensive plan amendment, the rezoning, and the site plan and architectural. The three applications that I mentioned, comp plan, rezoning, and site plan architectural, the planning commission also reviews those and they make a recommendation to the city council. And then those three applications, along with the final PUD, go to the city council for a final decision. And so the process is quite lengthy. COVID has added some time to that, but that is how I think that this project is going to lay out as far as the city's process. That was a huge amount that I just gave everybody, and lots of dates and numbers and days and things like that. So again, I'll open it up for any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Jana. And maybe Jasper, if you want to put that, I know it's a little outdated, but one thing we did want to point out is just the opportunity for public engagement that we're definitely prioritizing, you know, as part of the actual city required process. We will have some opportunities for the community to be engaged, but kind of spliced into this, we'll be inviting the ELAC committee separately to kind of review the work that's going in through this whole process.
Yeah, and I do want to mention that the other applications that would require this process, which does look like this, are going to be your comprehensive plan amendment, I believe, and definitely the rezoning. So plenty of public comment opportunities throughout both the preliminary plan process and also the other applications.
So
Jana, did that neighborhood meeting happen that was supposed to be in, I think it was April 2020?
It did.
Okay.
And we did have
Actually, it didn't. we scheduled it, but then COVID got in the way of that meeting. And we
Was that the
rescheduled that.
COVID?
Yeah.
I feel like we should redo that then, since if that didn't
We are
happen.
due for another one anyway.
Okay.
I'm
There
sorry,
were,
what?
yeah, there were a couple of meetings that I know fell off the radar. I thought this one was held, but if it wasn't, then yes, we do need to re-notice that and definitely hold that officially.
I think we went through that, and Jana, and that was Dawn, that was breaking up a little bit. We did go through our records. The notice went out, but we think the meeting was actually not held. So we're more than happy. Vicky, I think that was you who asked the question. We are more than happy to do a public meeting on the submittal. So whether or not, I mean, you tell us, Jana, that fits in on this next submittal. So then there's something to react to. However you want to do that, I think we're completely open to that process.
Yeah, that would be fine. We had some turnover in staff right about the same time. And so I thought that meeting had been held and Greg Thompson was in attendance. But if it wasn't, then we can definitely fit that into the second submittal review process and we'll fit it in there. Thanks,
Great.
Vicki.
Great, thank you.
I will say the only thing, and I'll just, maybe this is an editorial, I talked with one or two of you about maybe this kind of some of the changes that were being anticipated or maybe made. I think it's wonderful in that city council gets brought into the discussion a little earlier. Sometimes, as I've observed this process in Lafayette, it is completely, they are completely at the end of the process. And you're right, as Jana mentioned, they get all of the applications, all of the drawings, the renderings. It's such a completed package in a lot of ways that it's hard to really shape it more. So we actually think that's terrific for the community. We think it's good for us. It's good for just kind of an entitlement sequence, meaning how you do a project. We know kind of what you can move forward on and all of that. So we think it's terrific, but I'm just saying that as a project team, I certainly want to hear if there's any questions or comments or concerns from the community.
I do. I have a question, Marcus.
Sure.
Well, actually, this might be for Jana. So the Planning Commission, getting this to Planning Commission, February 23rd, 2022, that is very tentative, correct?
I think that's probably very tentative, yes.
Yeah, like I said, I'm just, all those dates past the done portions, and I will fix the one on the neighborhood meeting. Those are all just tentative. I just plopped those in right before the meeting just so that I could give you an example of how the dates lay out.
Okay. And so we have, it's going to be a very long time from now before anything goes to city council. Is that right?
I'm going to interject and just say, if we take the PUD through first before the other three applications, because really it is all one thing, it's all the PUD, it just 3 steps in it, then they could see that final PUD before we get into the rezoning and site plan applications. As far as, you know, the team goes, I'll let you guys answer that, Marcus, but a lot of this depends upon turnaround time. So once staff gets comments out, it takes 3 months for the comments to be addressed and the resubmittal to come in. It takes 3 months. They don't have a deadline on, you must turn it around within 30 days or whatever it is.
And Karen, I see your hand up and I'll call on you in just a second. Sorry, I missed you earlier, but Kirsten, the only thing I would answer, and anybody on our project team can say that, I think one thing that it's hard here to think about is it took us right a year and a half to get through the sketch plan, right? And then we go away. And then I don't want you to think that, oh, wow, you're going to be done in 4 or 5 months, right? Because that's what that looks like. What I think is important is actually what is done in 4 or 5 months, right? I think what we're talking about is a little bit more of the PUD or the kind of the zoning information, right? So Kirsten, like I'd point out again in the Planning Commission, those conditions, they said, here are some things that we need you to do from a zoning scheduling standpoint. So I think there is a possibility, maybe it's February, March, whatever that is, right? Very tentative, but I think it's a much smaller piece than what you're envisioning. It's not the whole project designed. It's not site planned with all the architectural. It's some elements of that go through that process. So I want you to have all the comfort that you guys are going to see it and approve it and go through that whole process. But I think it's a much different segment than you saw on the sketch plan submittal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and actually, Marcus, if you want to just, I don't want to ignore Karen's hand up, but if you want to flip to the next slide, this kind of goes over, I can speak to this very quickly about the overall project. So we were just deep in the weeds of the site planning review process, but that's just like one little piece of the component, one little component for this whole overall Willoughby Corner project. So what you're seeing here is just broad brush strokes. There are a number of inputs we still need before we can start hardlining some of these dates. For example, we're getting a GC on board so that they can kind of advise on constructability and phasing and all of this. But in general, we're looking at working through city entitlements this fall. So that's kind of everything Jana said. And then, yeah, I think Kirsten, maybe to your question, this is just almost like an iceberg, kind of the way Jana was describing it. It's the structure and the backbone of our project to move forward. So it's just some of the groundwork really this fall. We will have another ELAC meeting, at which point you'll be able to see some of the architecture, and that will be at a concept level. So the stuff that HDNA is doing will be moldable at that point. It'll be kind of a work in progress, early concepts. And then all through the spring and winter and spring of 2022, that's when we're in the real thick of designing. So that is another opportunity very separate from the site plan review, where we'll be able to get community input on the architecture. And then what's another very important kind of milestone is our financial application. So we're working to put in our tax credit application in the summer of next year. And these applications do require a certain amount of deliverables at these times. So we will need some of our entitlements, we'll need our site plan approvals. But again, this is summer of 2022. And then to kind of round out next year, we'll be going in for our building permits in fall, and that will kind of queue us up to start construction first quarter of 2023. So, oh, there's the cat. We are moving quickly, but it is a whole year-long process where we will really value ELAC chiming in to the design process as well.
Karen, maybe go ahead. Thank you very much, Molly. Karen, with your question.
I'm really happy that we're going to be changing the plans to allow council to weigh in earlier on all our projects. I'm so happy about that. We needed to do that a long time ago. They don't get a chance to really change anything by the time it gets to them the way they are now. So that's a great change. Can we please send out a message, an email to whatever lists you have, whatever way you've been using in the past to notify the community that this is moving again? I think there was a sign-up sheet at one point. There must be people on that. There must be other ways that you had connections. If you could send out something to let people know that this is on the move again, that would be very helpful, I think, for people who are interested.
Karen, that is a fabulous comment. We looked, and by the way, I just want to point out a couple of things. There's been some commentary on the chat about some folks have looked at the new website. It is terrific. It's really been redesigned. So Karen, I know you watch a lot of that and look at that and frankly share so much information. So thank you for doing that. We looked, Karen, we have a list of 300 plus people just on email lists, right? So we will do that. So I'm saying, yes, we will absolutely do that and share with them that this is moving forward. I think one thing, and Karen, I'm not asking for a month or something, but we want to be sure we can kind of capture how to say this to everybody, right? You all know this process really, really well. And I think we'll kind of work on how we're redoing it. I agree with you. I think this is great news because council gets to be involved early, right? It's not a kind of a last second when they almost have to approve something, right? I'll just say it that way. There's been 3 years of work. I mean, what are they going to do, right? And so I think this is such a better process. So Karen, I couldn't agree more. We will put something together. We may also respectfully ask if we share it with all of you, if you could share it with your groups as well. You all have been terrific about that. So yes and yes, we will get that, and I'll certainly share that with ELAC members. Okay. I do want to say, and maybe if there are other comments, I'm sorry I missed those hands earlier. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? So as you're thinking, or if you're unmuting, one thing I wanted to say, so we kind of jumped in, and Jasper, I don't know if we have another slide. This was kind of an important thing that we wanted to get to. So if you'd actually go back to that, sorry. The one thing that we just kind of laid out here is this idea of an ELAC meeting in November, whether that's early November, whatever that is. So thank you very much, Jana, for all that work and showing us that schedule. One thing that we thought is, hey, as we've customarily done, we share with ELAC before we kind of make that formal submittal, right, as we go through. So we are going to have and host a meeting in November to share those conceptual renderings, the things that Steve was talking about, all the things that his team is working on, really reflective of the guidance that you all have given us the last few years. So I don't know when that date is. I want to pick it at least a month in advance. Okay. So I want to try to get that so we can have schedules where Wendy and everybody else can be there. So that is our preliminary plan there, is to have an ELAC meeting. The other thing that I'd like to figure out, and that's between us and the city, is kind of where do we plug in that neighborhood meeting as well, right? So you see late fall there. We'll certainly be sensitive to the holidays, right? To November and December holidays. So we'll look at that. So why don't you look, as Bob requested in the chat, we will look for trying to figure out a little bit more of a detailed schedule. It may not have every date correct. It may still be tentative, but we'll try to lean in a little bit on what that means. Okay. So folks, just know we are coming back in November for an ELAC meeting, and hope to get on that cadence as we make a submittal, we come to you all, we make that submittal, then we get all the comments, everything back from the city, the referral agencies, then we come back and share that and work through that process again. So it will be very iterative in addition to those required public meetings. So I think that says a lot. We have covered so much information for being gone for 18 months, but I just want to open it up maybe one last time. If anybody has any comments or questions or whatever you'd like to share. We have all become more quiet, and I feel really badly about, I've taken away Karen's chat button, her raise hand function. Karen, I promise I wasn't trying to quiet you at all. So there we go.
I got it back. I found the chat. People tell me where it's hidden.
I saw that commentary. I saw it. It was really good. So that's great. Well, folks, we've had a couple of people just drop off. I want you to know we had about 25 people on, whatever it was. It's really a great turnout. I know it was a lot of our team members, but I can't stress how important it is for our new team members and all of us to kind of get to know you all. I'm going to reach out to the 3 or 4 other committee members that weren't able to join us. I do want to mention, certainly a mistake on our behalf, Evie Cohen could not join us tonight. This is Yom Kippur. That was certainly our mistake. So our apologies for that occurring on this same time as this evening tonight. So we've recorded it. We will share it with everybody. But just as one individual team member, but I know I can speak on behalf of all of us, we are so grateful to be back and working. And I hope you can see very committed to bringing this project to fruition. So I just want to say thank you all. If anybody has any questions, my phone number is still the same. It's 303-825-1671. You can call me anytime, and we'll continue to work with Jana and her great team at the city. And with that, I think I'll just say thank you all very much. Thanks for your patience, and everybody go have a great evening. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Okay.
Thank you.
Everybody.
All right.
Thanks,
See you all.
ELAC.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.